Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this public policy forum on civic space and accountability. I'd just like to inform you that this civic space where we're having this conversation is both physical and virtual. So we'll be having, we actually have participants that are also online, and we have speakers who will be joining us remotely as well. That's fitting because the conversation we'll be having today would also be about both the physical, the offline civic space, as well as the online civic space, because if there's anything that the events of the last few months have taught us is that both civic spaces are equally relevant to the accountability conversation in Nigeria. The shrinking civic space in Nigeria is undermining the fight against corruption. Journalists and activists have been forced to self-censor, eroding public demand for accountability. Sustaining the fight against corruption in a repressed civic space requires collective action from an effective coalition of civic actors. The civic space can be described as the political, social, legislative, and economic environment that empowers citizens to come together, share their common interests, differences, and concerns, and act individually and collectively to influence or shape policies being made in the country. The civic space in Nigeria is closing. Civicus downgraded Nigeria. Civicus is actually an international organization that does this reporting and research on the state of the civic space across the world. Nigeria was downgraded from obstructed to repressed in its people power under attack 2019 report. Evidence presented by local and international civic space trackers, such as Closing Spaces databases, Press Freedom Index, and the Civicus Monitor, point to rapidly backsliding civic freedoms in the country. State actors at the federal and regional levels have gained notoriety for adopting various tactics, including abductions, money-without trials, and restricting legislation to silence dissent, restrict civil society, and obstruct the traditional and digital spaces used for peaceful democratic engagement and activism. Today's discussion will explore how pro-accountability actors like yourself can sustain the effectiveness of their work in the current context of Nigeria's civic space. We thank the MacArthur Foundation for their generous support and commitment to improving accountability in Nigeria. We also thank the National Human Rights Commission, who has been a partner to the foundation and the leading human rights institution in Nigeria. The Yar'Adua Foundation is proud to contribute to promoting good governance and accountability in Nigeria. We remain committed to providing platforms for dialogue that foster a prosperous and inclusive nation. Thank you and welcome. So today's opening remarks will be delivered by our partner for this event, the Executive Secretary for the National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Anthony S.Y. Like I said earlier, Mr. Anthony Ojukwu is the ES for the National Human Rights Commission. Before his appointment to the NHRC, he served as Special Assistant to the Attorney General of the Federation, Minister of Justice, and was Administrative Secretary of the defunct National Electoral Commission in Imo State. Mr. Ojukwu holds a law degree from the University of Nigeria and a master's in law degree from the University of Lagos. Please, a round of applause as it comes. Good morning. How are we today? Everybody's fine. You feel okay? At least thank God we're able to get here safely. Okay. Madam Director General, Speaker, distinguished panelists, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the National Human Rights Commission, I want to commend the Director General of Yar'Adua Foundation, Jacqueline Faris, for convening this public policy forum. There can never be a more ideal moment in our democratic journey to organize this forum than now. I'm also happy to be invited to make these remarks at this auspicious occasion, where I understand that this forum will explore how accountability actors can sustain the effectiveness of their work in the current repressive climate of crackdown on civil spaces. It affords me an opportunity to tell our story. For me, as a human rights defender, crackdown on civil spaces simply means the stifling of basic freedoms. This has been exacerbated by COVID-19 and insecurity, both of which have instead containment measures restricting fundamental rights and basic freedoms in Nigeria and several countries all over the world. In fact, tension has been generated between the containment measures and some sets of rights, particularly the right to movement, protest, associate and assemble freely, media and internet freedoms, women and minority rights. Pro-accountability actors all over the world are now asking questions, both through the academic and civic discourses, about the compatibility and proportionality of the imposed restrictions to the legitimate aims of government. This forum is therefore a welcome opportunity to share our experiences at the National Human Rights Commission and the struggle to protect basic freedoms in the midst of apparent penchant for stifling of basic freedoms exacerbated by COVID-19 and the insurgency. As we are aware, the Commission was established in fulfillment of Nigeria's international obligations, the UN resolutions 48-134 of December 20, 1993, whereby all nations of the world were requested to establish national human rights commissions, national human rights institutions for the promotion and protection of human rights relative to their domain. Considering the mandate of the Commission, like ours, which was established by an Enabling Act in 1995, which Act was amended in 2010, and which was further amended in 2010 to make it truly independent, it is obvious that the Commission must be at the vanguard of the protection of civic spaces to ensure the survival of basic freedoms despite all odds. In discussing protection of civic spaces, especially during the clampdown and lockdown due to COVID-19, the rollout of the regulation signaled human rights and basic freedoms as a major casualty. Our work and that of many pro-accountability actors will enable a movement to investigate complaints of human rights violations and visits for on-the-spot assessment of incidents of human rights violations. Again, we rely heavily on media reports, both electronic and print, to monitor human rights situation across the wide and heavily populated country like Nigeria. Clampdown on movement and assembly was therefore a direct crippling of our ability to discharge our mandate of monitoring
decided that the way forward was deployment of virtual communication technology via mobile phones to track and report incidents of human rights violations. This leveraged on the widespread access to telephones with internet connection in Nigeria, especially by the youth, which was the population that can be categorized as endemic in a climate of clampdown on movement and assembly. Developing an app for reporting violation of human rights from any location was the country for us. We thank God that the Yar'Adua Foundation found in us a partner and adapted this app that it has successfully deployed to INEC and NCDC, which was to be the challenges of the commission. So the commission set up a virtual situation with additional infrastructure from Switzerland Embassy in Nigeria and was able to monitor and report on human rights violations during COVID-19 clampdown on civic spaces. How did this help? One would ask. Most of us would have heard about the report of the Commission on Law Enforcement on COVID-19 regulations, which brought about the fact that within the first 14 days of implementation of the lockdown, law enforcement agents had executed 18 persons, while COVID itself had only led to the death of 14 persons. This report jolted the government and people of Nigeria and the world at large to the dangers of excessive repression and the death of human rights in enforcing a regulation after all a death sentence. Subsequently, law enforcement agents toned down the enforcement of the clampdown against human rights. Now, a range of other issues sprang up after that report. The Commission and other accountability actors like the NPA pushed for fair hearing in the trial of regulation offenders. The mobile courts hurriedly put up in place had no defense lawyers for alleged violators. Looking for the NHRC, the Bar Association, and other pro-accountability actors to provide defense lawyers at all mobile courts to try regulation violators. In the course of analysis of the violations with the restrictions, it was discovered that sexual and gender-based violence was on the increase. Worse still was the fact that the Commission and other service providers and accountability actors in the area of SDBV could not access the deal for support, counseling, and other services required. The problem associated with this upsurge in SDBV was reported as a challenge and highlighted in the NHRC report on the effects of the clampdown. It was also reported by other pro-accountability actors. Stakeholders responded swiftly in raising awareness around this. The Commission, in collaboration with the Open Society Initiative for West Africa and the Office of the Vice President, launched the ONSOP platform for reporting incidents of SDBV to the Commission. The ONSOP platform for reporting incidents of SDBV is also a mobile phone platform for reporting incidents of SDBV, where such incidents will be directed to relevant providers in the 36 states of the country for solution. With the support of OSIWA, the Commission had also established a call center for reporting cases of human rights violations, including SDBV. The call center is presently provided with technical support and a toll-free number by the EU Spotlight Initiative. Emboldened by the data and reports from the Commission and other accountability actors, stakeholders mounted a nationwide campaign to call for a state of emergency on rape and other sexual and gender-based violence. Championed by the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, the Federal Executive Council, and the Nigerian Governors Forum, all rose to the clarion call for action and declared the state of emergency on rape and SDBV, where all state authorities recommitted themselves to put all necessary measures in place to curb the surge of rape and SDBV. The Ministerial Committee, made up of the cross-section of SDBV and pro-accountability actors in government and the public partners, was also set up to mobilize resources, guide policy, and legislation to stem the scourge. The Commission has since embarked on public hearing on sexual and gender-based violence across the states in Nigeria to bring accountability to bear for allegations of sexual and gender-based violence. To blaze the trail on the part of government in this regard, the admiration of most accountability actors. Through this, provide opportunity for survivors to tell their stories in privacy and confidentiality, provide psychosocial support, compensation and damages for SDPP violations, empowerment for survivors and victims, and prosecution in appropriate cases. We strive to change the narratives here. Other fallouts from the HRC analysis of restrictions were the issues of treatment of COVID-19 patients and the treatment of our Nigerian children. The Commission issued advisory for treatment of COVID-19 patients to restore their rights to dignity and privacy. It will be recalled that they arose the mischief for return of our Nigerian children to their states of origin, which the Commission intervened, stating that this was not the solution, and recommended to partner with affected states to fashion out permanent rehabilitation, reunification with their families, medical treatment, education and empowerment programs for the affected population. All affected states were mandated by the Commission to roll out a plan of action on this. Pandemic normal of pendency for restriction of civil space. The Yar'Adua Foundation is presently partnering with the Commission to migrate these processes fully to deployment of technology for monitoring and investigating human rights violations. The Yar'Adua Foundation has worked out a template with the Commission for full-blown reporting, investigation, tracking, and processing of human rights violations. This is being strong presently to make it fully adaptable to the Commission's operations. The key challenge in this operations is insufficiency of required infrastructure to facilitate this migration, so critical for our survival in this climate of restriction of civil space in the country and the world at large. It is not in doubt that most national human rights institutions all over the world, and particularly in Africa, are not well resourced. The reason cannot be far-fetched. With the underbelly of authorities exposed, it is obvious that empowering a human rights commission and by extension, the program accountability actors around the table, the picture for restriction of civil space will be a long-drawn battle. Under the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights and other international instruments, the government of each nation has the primary responsibility for promotion and protection of human rights. The Commission is presently partnering with the Senate and House Committee on Human Rights to amend the NHRC Act to activate the Human Rights Fund for the support of human rights activities of the Commission and other pro-accountability actors in the room. The public hearing on the bill has been completed and is awaiting report and final reading on the floor of Parliament before passage into law. Today, the country is replete with the phenomenon of insecurity and violation of human rights. Police brutality, extrajudicial killings, and torture do not shock Nigerians anymore. Each day, we wake up with stories of scores of Nigerians either killed by insurgents, kidnappers, bandits, herdsmen, the military, or the police. In this regard, it is heart-rending on what is happening in all parts of the country, especially in the southeast, where it is being widely reported that law enforcement authorities are hounding and extrajudicially executing innocent youths in the guise of branding them as secessionists. I do not think any well-meaning Nigerian today will approve secession. I do not think any well-meaning Nigerian today, as accountability actors, we must rise and condemn the insurgency, kidnappings, banditry, and new phenomenon of attacking law enforcement personnel and destroying their infrastructure, secession, or hoisting of flags to claim territories in any part of the country. We must condemn that. But even if students or the youth in higher institutions or other unemployed youth have sympathy for ongoing general call for restructuring of the country, should they be branded insurgents or secessionists and shot and executed while unarmed? If an alleged insurgent or secessionist runs into a family compound of many people, and the law enforcement agents entitled to wipe out the entire household, even if they show reluctance to surrender the alleged insurgent or secessionist, where communities provide food for insurgents or secessionists, and mingle with them in their local markets. And the military authorities entitled to wipe out the such community or the markets because their fine products are used to sustain their legions against secessionists? Are they not entitled to be arrested and tried by the courts of competent jurisdiction and jailed or executed in accordance with the law? Is any authority entitled to encourage law enforcement officers to embark freely on torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, and extrajudicial execution, and promise to give them cover as reported? We at the Commission insist that no person or authority can do so under the Constitution of Nigeria. And we shall ensure that if such reports are true, as may be evidence from the conduct of some officers and panels, that such authorities or persons must be prosecuted under the Constitution at the appropriate time. The protection of civic space is a duty which we must all help the government to fulfill. That is our mandate and that is our commitment. Today, Nigerians are proudly committed to the NSAS panels of investigation all over the states and Abuja. NSAS was made popular as a slogan to end the injustices and brutalities of the past by law enforcement agents. The protests that resulted almost consumed this country. Thank God for the earlier report of the Commission on SARS and police reforms that provided a ready response to the legitimate demands of the NSAS protesters. We are changing the narratives. Before now, the arrogant words of impunity on the lips of some law enforcement agent was, "I'll kill you and nothing will happen. I'll deal with you and nothing will happen," etc., etc. But today in Nigeria, can any law enforcement officer confidently re-echo those words without watching his shoulders? The answer is no. Those who still indulge in impunity do so at their own peril. The government is committed to implementing the white paper on SARS and police reforms, and we shall not relent in reminding them of this obligation. The panels are sitting all over the state, providing damages for human rights violations. Damages are being awarded and being paid by government. The corpses of victims are being recovered and returned to their families for burial rights. Corruptly confiscated properties by police officers are being returned to their owners. Formerly untouchable police officers are being summoned even from their retirement to account for human rights violations. Officers have been recommended for prosecution, for retirement, demotion in rank, rendering of public apology. Victims and survivors are provided opportunity to tell their stories and heal the tension in their minds of those aggrieved by the violation of their rights continue to win for peaceful coexistence. The clear indication for all this is that there should always be a day of reckoning for human rights violations, and this is necessary for our national development. Whereas over 270 complaints were reported at Abuja panel on SARS, the total complaints before all the panels across the state is about 2,700. Nigerians are accessing these panels and telling their stories, which supports to the court system in providing justice and protection of civil rights, encouraging healing, engendering peace for security, peaceful coexistence, and national. Pro-accountability actors around the room and all over the world must never relent in documenting and fashioning out ways for protection. 2019 recommendations of the Commission following its investigation of SARS and police brutality was the establishment of state and local government police to close the ungoverned spaces in Nigeria and live insecurity in the world. Whereas that recommendation that constituted government then, today the call for state and local government police is a clamor on the lips of all Nigerians to stem the tide of insecurity in the country. Factor in the ongoing efforts and constitutional reforms. In conclusion, for violators of human rights, I say stop human rights violations because it is the only sustainable way for peace and development. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to share my thoughts on our
Please, another round of applause for the Executive Secretary. It's important that we need to remember that we can play a role of documenting some of these infractions on the civic space. That would be our role in our accountability as well, because as the Executive Secretary says, there will be a day of reckoning in the future, just as we are having with NSAS at the moment. It's time for our keynote address, and our keynote address will be delivered by Hajia Saadatu Mahdi, MFR. She's going to be joining us remotely because she's unable to be here present today. So please, would you kindly dim the lights so we can see her on the screen? Hajia Saadatu Mahdi, MFR, is a women's rights activist and Secretary General of the Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative, RAPA. She's a member of the National Human Rights Commission of Nigeria and responsible for coordination of two important gender platforms focused on preventing violence against women and promoting women's inclusion in governance and politics. Hajia Mahdi has published over 20 books on violence against women and women's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for her. Hajia.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And my audio is on. My audio is on. Can you hear me, please? Hello. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can I be heard? I need to be unmuted from your end. Hello.
Hajia, we can hear you.
Oh, good thing, good thing. So once more, good morning, everyone, and my apologies for my physical absence. And I want to also respect the established protocols of time and ask for the forgiveness of the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Center. I had planned to be here, to be there physically, but exigencies at family level have not allowed that to happen. I hope I can deliver what I have prepared. Please, can we have my presentation shared on the screen? Thank you. So I'm supposed to be addressing in particular, because like we've heard from the ES of the National Human Rights Commission, these issues of, the shrinking space, it's an all-round thing, shrinking civic space. So I've been asked to address social and cultural norms that affect collective action in Nigeria's civic space. And I'm doing that from a perspective of a practitioner in women's human rights, to the extent it affects women's capacities and agencies in different contexts. And then above all, collectively, how does it affect us to the effect of corruption finding a seat in our systems, and also reducing the decibel of the voices of citizens. Can I have the first slide, please? The first slide, please. Someone, thank you very much. So addressing social cultural norms is critical to influencing collective behavior. Social and cultural norms are rules or exceptions of behavior and thoughts based on shared beliefs within a specific cultural or social group. While often unspoken, norms offer social standards for appropriate and inappropriate behavior that governs what is and what is not acceptable in interactions amongst people. My contribution will explore social and cultural norms context for shrinking civil space in Nigeria and recommend approaches to galvanize individual and collective pushback. Thank you. Okay, I'll just have to continue. Okay. So I was hoping that rather than go into, a rigmarole of the situations, I will respond to questions which were kindly shared with me by Yar'Adua Foundation. First of all, what are those collective practices that make Nigeria's civic space especially vulnerable to repression? The first, in my view, and sorry for the numbering, is culture of silence as practiced in families, communities, and at tribal levels. I have decided to also divide some of these things into our cultural settings, particularly the three major cultural groups in Nigeria. And this is with all due respect to all other cultural groups in Nigeria. And here you find that the silence is around everything. People are socialized from youth, from infancy, actually, to learn to keep quiet, to keep family secrets, to ensure that you don't wash your dirty linens outside, and to an extent, it suppresses the voice of one or the other. And in the context of our social stratus, it muzzles the voices of vulnerable people who ordinarily would not have a voice. It muzzles the voice of those people seeking to be heard or seeking to seek redress. They are told to keep quiet and things will work out. Allah zai gyara, it will be taken care of by God, and there is a day of reckoning, like I have heard my brother say, there is a day of reckoning. But the God that made us provided for justice to be dispensed on earth. So why would a person have to wait to go to heaven or to die before they get redress for iniquities visited upon them? This is a very, very key thing when it comes to vulnerable groups being repressed, their voices being repressed. Women in the homes, when the man speaks, it is the end of story. When your leader speaks, it's the end of story. You cannot make comments. We have seen this also transcend into the social groupings that even we see today. I have had many of colleagues who have spoken to the issues of, belonging to the social platforms of, ACF and others, where really the voices are not of everyone, but of the elders. And so even if you're in the room, your voice is not necessarily, you are supposed to be silenced and defer. The second cultural norm, which affects all cultural groups anyway, is that of ostracization at tribal and trade levels. You find that because of the dynamics of belonging, because of the dynamics of socioeconomic status, because of the dynamics of larger pictures of social or national issues, people do suffer some level of ostracization when they do, or when they become positive deviants asking for accountability. For instance, if you look at the Fulani culture still, when they decide a market is not going to work for them, or they have a reason to abandon a market or to fight back, looking at economics, there's what they call dongel pulaku, that is they cast like a curse on anyone who goes to that market outside of their opening of that ostracization. We have what we have also with the Yorubas. We have what we have also with the Igbo. So the point is, in fear of these ostracization practices, people have a tendency to keep quiet and not to speak up or to be positive deviants within their society, because they may end up getting, punished rather than being celebrated. Then we have another cultural practice, which is unspoken in Yoruba practice exactly, and in some other practices, because I'm limiting myself to the three major, that even where you differ, and we know that the Yorubas have a natural and innate nature of speaking out. However, because of that identity dynamics of belonging to one group or the other, whether sublime or open, you find that people have to comply and keep quiet because they want to identify with that platform. They want the protection of that platform. As such, even where they differ in their thought or conviction, they are forced to keep quiet. The fourth thing is about blind reverence to leaders on account of culture or faith for security and survival. This is with the Igbos, and we can see this playing out in the dynamics around the issue of the restructuring of Nigeria. This is particularly when you come to the issues of the secession conversations. Some of the leaders are not necessarily saying anything, but they are being followed because probably they own the economics that would deter anything that restructures Nigeria to their disadvantage. So if you want to be secure and you want to survive within those environments and within those platforms, the likelihood is you are more likely to believe and blindly follow the leaders, even where you have a conviction that probably sitting down on a table to negotiate Nigeria is the best option. Looking at what we need to jettison and what we need to bring into our constitution is what we require for Nigeria to progress. People will still keep quiet and follow their leaders by the nose. Sometimes the leaders are obviously wrong, but instead of us being able to find ways of communicating this and allowing conviction for accountability and for other things to go, we find ourselves, keeping quiet. The next slide, please. The next slide, please. Good. Now, okay, I need to go to my, let me just use my phone. I think there's nobody in charge of this thing. Okay. Now, the next question is about whether there is a nexus between these practices and social drivers of corruption in Nigeria. The answer is capital yes. These practices drive and justify corruption in different forms and situations. A UNODC 2020 study interrogated the justification of use of stolen resources for faith-aligned activities. The result was heavily weighted in the affirmative, meaning that if you steal money and you bring it to the church or to the mosque, probably it cleanses it and it makes it legitimate that you were the one who brought it. You could even get a front seat or a front mat seat in the mosque or in the church. Then also you find that the identity struggle, which we spoke to about, which gives you security and cover, justifies individual acts of corruption seen as share of the national cake. You want to belong, you want to have chieftaincy titles, you want to be the one who is, nominated by your community or by your state. So what you do is you ensure that you bring in as much of the national cake home so that, you earn that status. Then the issue of the blind reverence culture limits the capacity of citizens to point out and hold corrupt persons accountable. Fifthly, the culture of silence removes accountability because it then says whoever does something, whether it is wrong or right, whether the context hurts, whether human rights are suspended or are at peril, we have to allow it to go because our culture says we must not speak. And this allows impunity to thrive. Now, the next question I'm trying to respond to in this discussion is what opportunities exist for changing collective responses to civic repression. The first proposal I have is about village square conversations. All of us are used to, as activists and as program persons, we are familiar with the use of open space technology and peer conversations. These help us to drive down the conversation about the rights of citizens to make contributions to national issues. It also gives us the room for persons at that level to organize and to agree on certain positions that they accept or they do not accept. These are very, very, what we now call them town hall meetings and so on. But what I'm saying here is that we need to find a way of organizing our conversations, of also organizing the spaces that allow people to freely express and then take positions that they can own and they can put forward, in terms of the national conversation around the issues of corruption, around the issues of accountability. The second opportunity is the use of native intelligence. We have seen it, folklore and animations and adaptations as social media clips and links were used heavily in our elections and are also being used right now in the constitutional review processes. Now we need to resort to this because they connect persons at the lower level, because all of this English we are speaking about accountability, about repression, about shrinkage, has to be taken down, and it has to be taken down in a manner and in ways that our people understand and could relate with. Then the informal spaces, also these are provided by cultural and social events, naming and wedding ceremonies, August meetings, these traditional local market day settings, which we call in the North Kalankwa, or which we call so many things, Yam Festival, Fishing Festival, local championship and sports arena, Let us find ways in using these informal safe spaces to provide a link between the desire to open up the voices of citizens, or to at least concretize and generate a critical mass of these voices to channel to the accountability discourse. There are also the opportunities of age transition activities. These are both male and female. They provide a context on inclusion in decision-making, in political representation, and the response strategies to GBV prevalence in communities as well. They also scale up accountability demands targeting elected representatives in particular. Because this is a transition, it is so important for us to ensure that people moving from one age bracket into the next understand the responsibilities that are behoved them to speak up, to also demand accountability, and to ensure that the correct delivery of governance happens. This is a very, very critical opportunity that we should be able to harness and utilize. Now, the next thing is about how can accountability actors take advantage of these opportunities. The opportunities are there, and what you need to be sure of is that we keep saying at our level that they don't understand, or there's a limit to how much you can do. But we need to explore and also be able to take the bull by the horn and remove the issues of funding, which we see as constraints. If we ingrain these ideas within communities, within societies, using the few that we think are with us, then we find that social and CSO program designers will explore and step down the concept of who can, in order to reach down to critical masses, using the opportunities of working with citizens in their normal and accepted safe spaces. Same thing that pro-accountability actors need to do will be to move away from this limitation of educated elites. The opportunity of drawing on leadership instincts of local actors will prove very productive, ensuring ownership and sustainability of our accountability demands. Then the corruption impact issue-based conversations we need to put up should be contextualized into the daily needs and spaces of citizens. These thick concepts and long grammar turn off even the averagely exposed citizen. What this means is language, nomenclature, as well as our attitude as we speak to them and as we pull them into the arena of accountability demands. Finally, on this note, collective action needs to be translated into equal stake and inclusion for men, women, persons living with disabilities, IDPs, including the constituency of domestic service providers, who can then become effective whistleblowers. We tend to also limit who is an actor or who needs to do what. So if we want this to happen, everybody must be on the table, so that using the social groupings, we're in a position to ensure everybody is included, everybody has a role, everybody has a stake, and then sustainability and ownership becomes a given. The next question is, are there examples of social norms interventions that pro-accountability actors in Nigeria can replicate? Yes, I have also 4, but I know there are many, and some of our participants can also, relate to some of them and give us more. But I have picked out 4 of those I have been able to look through. One is the community watch culture. In days gone by, communities are conscious of their numbers, of their strata, of their neighbors, of their visitors. And they serve to identify negative practices, especially in delivering personal and collective responsibility. I know for a fact that in some communities, there is communal or family feeding, which then looks at how does the man look after his family? Is his family well fed in accordance with his income levels? Are those policing elders who we really fear? You don't want to even meet your dad. These policing elders are there and they have the mandate of the community to punish you or to correct you when you are wrong. And then we have other indices that communities use in identifying leadership. I remember very well, and I think many of us will also remember, that there was a time in this country on the leadership of the Senate, one of the indices that was put up against one of the aspirants was that he couldn't hold down his family. How can he hold down a Senate and Nigeria as a whole? So communities have always had this, and there are opportunities that we can, scale up and also revive, because a lot of them under the rubrics of either human rights or under the rubrics of freedom of whatever, we have lost some of them. Then there's the concept of shame. I know many people say a lot of us are now shameless. I don't think shame will ever leave our psyche, because shame is shame. Nobody wants to be an aberration or a stain to their family. And this helps to dissuade. It may seem intrusive, but it helps to keep family members and communities in check, and it enforces accountability to the family or to the community. Then we have community delegation. There are norms that promote delegation of roles in an effort to groom youth and provide near seamless leadership transitions. These help transitions. They give voice, because you recall I had said we need to ensure everybody is on the table. So they help transitions, they give voice and promote meritocracy, through which accountability is ingrained at a very early stage. A lot of people seem to forget that the monarchs, when they want to protect those they want to inherit them, they actually push them away or take them to another environment entirely. We also have a situation where at the level of the farming community, delegation is given when farms are allocated to youth. And this gives them a chance to learn leadership, to also learn accountability, and to ensure that the best is the one who gets the delegated authority awarded to him or her. Now, the final one is about community awards. These are celebrating exemplary achievements and providing role models. Unfortunately, this has also been bastardized, because it has allowed room for people who have access to our resources to take them and go seeking for celebrations and community awards of chieftaincy and so on. But if CSO programming can take on this and put them in positive context, I believe it will be something that helps us to ensure that we hold down accountability of our leaders, and also ensure that voices are heard to do the right. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that there are positive and negative social norms in most contexts, which can uphold or repress citizen voice, thereby reducing the drive for accountability demands. Every culture, and I think here what this means is we need to commission studies into our cultural norms, so that then we deliberately extract those that we can utilize for expanding the space and the voices for our citizens to contribute to national development, as well as to the demands for accountability. Doing this will mean looking also squarely into the eyes of communities to say these cultural norms may have served a purpose before, but today this is the negative impact they have on your development and on the development of our country. This will take a whole lot of negotiations once the study happens, and the study should happen with their participation. The next point of conclusion I have is social norms in themselves do not serve a purpose unless they are collectively appreciated and implemented to the benefit of all. Having to just speak to one group in our study, or having to only target one group or one issue in our study, may limit who we see as an owner or as an appreciating person or entity or social group in the implementation of the programs we may design to expand voice and space. So it is important that we're able to collectively appreciate what social norms mean to us, and we bring in everybody onto the table so that everyone also benefits. Similarly, social norms are not static and they could be reviewed. This is why I'm proposing the study to fit current realities for social survival and the needed change to provide quality governance inputs and benefits for all. If this is done and we take it as a project that supplements what we want to do or what we are doing at the level of programming, at the level of NGOs, at the level of government and CSOs, it is so important that we contextualize these norms into the realities of people. And that's why the study is very, very important. Finally, in terms of conclusion, repressing voices provides the cannon fodder for revolt. And in most cases, the rules of engagement become suspended, allowing for chaos, anarchy, and even impunity. Our typical example in this case is the case of the NSAS riots. It is not as if Nigerians have not been crying out against the iniquities of SARS. It is not as if government was unaware of the excesses and of the shortcomings of the provision of services by that unit of the police force. It is also not a hidden fact that people who have tried to extract accountability or justice for injustice meted on them by this arm of government or arm of law enforcement have not been successful in getting justice. Most importantly, there is no room, or there was no room for any collective action to happen until we came to heads. And this is why I say repressing voices, ignoring injustice, failure to give justice in due course provides the cannon fodder for revolt. And in most cases, there is nothing like rules of engagement. We've just had my brother, the National Human Rights Commission, ES, say that there is a day of reckoning. But before the day of reckoning, are there things we can do to ensure that even when this happens, there is a limit to how much chaos and anarchy we will have? Because chaos and anarchy are part of human nature. You organize spontaneity also is another factor that brings in chaos and anarchy. But where rules of engagement are suspended, we know what happens. Human rights go through the window, faith and culture go through the window, and worst of all, the vulnerable become again the most victims of that situation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the Yar'Adua Center for what they are doing in terms of the issue of civic space and accountability, and to plead with them that in addition to all we are doing in terms of formal work around, increasing voice and, opening up the civic space, we do not forget the roles that social norms do play and could play in ensuring that we open that space and we also raise the decibel of accountability demands. Thank you and good morning once more. Hello? Hello?
A keynote address highlighted the importance, the critical role that social norms play in creating for our accountability. Here, understand silencing of citizen voices should not be normal. Repression of civic space should not be normal. And intolerance of demands for accountability should also not be normal as well. So it's a time for us to begin to create normals that make accountability, facilitate accountability in our society. Thank you once again, Hajia Sadat Madi, for that address. I would like to ask that the lights be dimmed once more. And we're going to play some videos for you. These videos showcase some of the work with accountability partners across the country around the civic space in Nigeria, to encapsulate some of the discussions we've already, the points that have already been made by previous speakers. Please enjoy. Thank you.
The National Human Rights Commission, NHRC, is committed to ensuring justice for all Nigerians, regardless of ethnicity, religion, gender, or financial status. The NHRC has launched a platform for you to speak up and easily report this injustice. Simply visit report.nhrc.gov.ng to file a report. On the homepage, you can submit a complaint by clicking on File Complaint. You will be redirected to our online complaint form. Please fill out all the necessary information requested. Indicate if you are making the complaint personally or on behalf of someone else. Provide as much information as you can on alleged violators. Also indicates the nature and class of the violation. It is important that we know everything. You may also upload multiple pieces of evidence, for example, a picture or link to a video regarding the incident. Confirm that the information you have provided is accurate and true, and finally, submit your form. Be assured that your identity will not be made public. This information will only be used by the Commission to follow up on your report. You will receive notifications via email for further instructions on how to track your complaint. Our dedicated staff will review your complaint and assist you to seek the appropriate redress or remedy. National Human Rights Commission, entrenching a culture of respect for human rights in Nigeria. The National Human Rights Commission, NHRC, is committed to ensuring justice for all Nigerians, regardless of ethnicity, religion, gender, or financial status. Are you a victim or witness to a human rights violation?
Has someone violated your human rights? You can file a complaint with the National Human Rights Commission. Visit report.nhrc.gov.ng. Fill the complaint form. Attach evidence if available. You can call this toll-free number 0800-647-2428 or walk into any NHRC office near you. Your complaint will be logged on the incident portal. When your complaint is received, NHRC ensures your complaint is within its scope and jurisdiction. A preliminary investigation occurs before recommendation is made. If further investigation is needed, the Commission conducts an oral hearing or public inquiry or refers your case to an external agency for further action. NHRC investigation officers will compile facts and propose action for the Commission's Governing Council to close or revisit the case. You will be informed of the Commission's final decision. NHRC works to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to state their case regardless of financial status. Don't suffer in silence. Let the NHRC help you get justice. For additional questions, email us at info@nhrc.gov.ng or visit www.nigeriarights.gov.ng.
We're being, forced into hiding. We're being arrested or intimidated, both online and offline.
Citizens are prevented from participating in basic governance. key groups are excluded from the social, economic, and political life of the country.
People who have different opinions about things that are happening can no longer express themselves without the consequences of either being detained or being put in prison.
So when people say that the civic space in Nigeria is shrinking, they speak to a lot of things that are going on currently in Nigeria.
Closing civic spaces has significant impact on insecurity in any country.
History have told us that when people cannot have conversation about their grievances or get safe space to have conversations so that they can speak their mind, they take laws into their hands.
The changes that will come up because you're stopping people from self-expression will lead to loss of properties and lives.
I believe that the top 3 duties of care of every government should be security of lives and property, the provision of an environment within which people can dream, aspire, and then the protection of those dreams and those aspirations.
Nigerians have learned to get their voices heard. They always express exactly what they feel, and when they are not happy with what they see going on, they engage the process.
If Nigeria, let me just put it that way, wants to utilize civic space to stabilize us, to foster peace and peaceful coexistence, it has to be more receptive to citizen voice.
We must build for ourselves a nation, not just a country, a nation that has a government that is by the people and for the people at all times.
Nigeria is an interesting country. You know, you have people with different backgrounds, different views, different beliefs, who have grown from different parts of the countryside.
And so there's a huge potential for people to misunderstand each other. We need to encourage a culture of healthy debate, of dialogue, as a means of addressing our differences.
Cultural norms have impact on almost everything in our lives, but most especially within the African context. When the elder speaks, it is the final word. When the ruler speaks, it's the final word. When the husband speaks, there is no pushback.
But young people speak up about the issues that they face and they get dismissed or they get punished or they get even a further restriction of the rights that they're trying to complain about.
For persons with disabilities living in the shrinking space, it means discrimination, it means exclusion, it means underrepresentation.
I think that we need to continue to express our opinions and ourselves, and we should not be constrained.
But as we do this, let's organize properly. Let's educate ourselves. Let's use data to inform our conversation and our policies and our decision making as young people. And it is not a competition.
I think the Nigeria we should aspire to is a Nigeria in which every person is respected as stated by our constitution, where we're all equal before the law.
I believe that this nation, Nigeria, can be greater than the sum of its parts if our civic space accommodates not just the voices of the few, but of everyone.
2841 and enter submit. And so the first question is your gender. So let's have, looks like only women are the masters here. Either that or we have only women in the room. So tell us what your gender is, male or female. So I'm just going to give a bit of time for everyone to respond to that. Looks like the men are catching up now. Looks like we're a little bit slow on the draw with our mobile phones. Oh, so we are equal now, 70-70. Let's see if the men will overtake or if the future is female, I guess. All right, so come again. The code is 22352841. Menti.com, MENTI.com, and the code is 22352841. You can put it on the chart as well in the Zoom so people get to see that. So again, menti.com, MENTI.com, and the code is 22352841. This is just to get like a sense of the opinions in the room, because we are about to have a panel session, and it'll be great for the people in the room and people also online in the room to set the agenda for the conversation. So first is gender. All right. Please, if you have responded, raise your hand. If you've been able to use it. Okay, put your hands down. If you're having a chat, if you're having challenges, raise your hand. Okay. What's your challenge? What? You're using Chrome. So type MENTI.com in your browser. You would see, it would open up and ask you for a code. Can you see that? Huh? It's opening. Okay, so data. All right, let's move on. So next slide. Age. Let's get the sense of how old we are in the room. Not the football age or your real age. Don't worry, it won't collect your name. All right, so mostly young people. Let's give it a second. See. Still mostly young. Although we extended our youth to 40 a little bit, I hope you guys don't mind. I know that it's 18 to 35, according to National Youth Policy. But we know that some people are still young at heart. So we moved that a little bit. Okay, looks like a lot more people are now getting it. But still, yes, it looks like some of us who are 41 and older are in the minority. Okay, can we move to the next question? So next question, have you ever participated in a protest or street march for any cause? Ever? Yes or no? Yes or no? Have you, whether it's a march for cancer, it's for, you know, protests for gender-based violence, NSAS? Yes or no? Don't worry, it's completely anonymous, so we won't know who it is that yes or no. Can we wait a little bit for everyone to kind of answer? All right, next question. Okay, so you have a word there. So what civil liberties issues? So just type in anything, it's 25 characters. What civic liberty issues most disturbs you? So this is more like a word cloud. So the more words that, the more people put a certain word, the bigger it becomes. So just type a word. What is it that disturbs you the most, especially in Nigeria, that has to do with human rights and civil liberties? Not your phone number. So just type in something, take your time. All right, so we can see that the word cloud is forming, and it's changing gradually. And there's a big one there, but looks like this. So the biggest concern in the room so far is freedom of expression. But I guess when we go into the panel session, we will unpack some of these things, because there's quite a bit of them that might need unpacking. For instance, something like bad government. What does that mean? Is government good or bad? Well, there's some things that government does that we mean when we say bad government. But so far, I think nobody's going to overtake freedom of expression. That's the biggest concern in the room at the moment, is people are not able to say things that they would love to say. But there's gender-based violence there as well. I think those are the three: freedom of expression, which is the same as freedom of speech; bad governments, which is the same as bad governance; and gender-based violence, number 3. They're not the same. Okay, so there's bad governance, which is separate from government being bad in and of itself. Thank you for that correction. So the government can be bad, but the governance is good. Or the governance can be bad, but the government is still good somehow. Because I think we have that debate online sometimes, that this government is a very good government, but their intention is not translating into, so maybe that's possible, and maybe we need to unpack that in our conversation as we talk about the civic space. Next question. Okay, so yes or no, will you be willing to participate in a protest? That issue that you talked about earlier, some of us said bad governance. So will you be willing to participate in a protest against bad governance? Not the government. Government might not be bad, but we are saying government is not a problem with you, but bad governance. Whatever your issue was, are you willing to go on the streets or to participate in a protest or a street march, something public? So let's give it some time, because there are some people here who, even though they care about the issue so much, let's hear from more people. Looks like majority of us would still be willing to go out there and issues that we care about. All right, let's move to the next question. So this one is a sliding scale. So we're going to, oh no, this is not a sliding scale yet. This is your opinion. We've heard from Civicus, we've heard from Closing Spaces Database and other international audiences, but from your own opinion, how would you describe the civic space in Nigeria? Is it closed, which is completely suppressed? Is it repressed, which is, there's still some space to wiggle, but is severely constrained? Is it obstructed, which means there is contest, but that contest can go either way? Is it narrow, which means that from time to time there's right violation, but in general, people can still enjoy their civil liberties? And the last one is it open, which means can it accommodate everyone? So we are all congregating around either repressed or obstructed. But nobody is saying that it is completely open. Huh? Zero. But some people are saying that it's just obstructed. There is narrow.
Yeah.
But majority of you seem to be of the opinion that the civic space in Nigeria is repressed. So you agree with Civicus. All right. Next question. So this one is a sliding scale. So we take our time. And this one is, to what extent do you support the following freedoms? Now, this is about your opinion. Remember, we've talked about social norms earlier, and that we have differing levels of support for things that we consider constitutional civil liberties. So this is a test for you, and it's anonymous. These civil freedoms that we've listed, how strong is your support for each one of them? Now, it's completely anonymous as well. You know, you might not support some completely. You might think that because of the security situation we have in the country, that there's need to dial back on some of these freedoms to ensure security. That's a trade-off. So feel free to let us know how strong your support is, from do not support to strongly support. So there's a freedom of expression, which I believe everybody seems to be, you know, this is one of the biggest issues here. There's a freedom of assembly and association is very close to that is the NSAS protest. Freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. An example of that would be the Shiites who parade the streets and who recently have experienced a lot of run-ins with the authorities and extrajudicial killing. So I'll just give you some time to process that and tell us how strongly. The final one is freedom from discrimination. All right. Some of the late opinions seem to disagree slightly with freedom of discrimination, freedom from discrimination. Let's see, the freedom of expression is still the biggest issue in the room, followed by freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. But last is the freedom of assembly. Looks like, even though it's still strong, but it's of the least priority here in the room. Interesting. Some of the late opinions seem to disagree slightly with some of these freedoms. And we would explore some of these, why we disagree with these freedoms and what kind of trade-offs we are willing to make as Nigerians with these freedoms, to guarantee some other things that we believe that the states can provide us. Next, I think this is the last question. Okay, so last question. To what extent do you agree with the following? So there's a drop-down button. So you want to rank these 5 things in the order of your preference, or in the order of your agreement. How would you rank these 5 things in order of your agreement? The first one is, in Nigeria, I'm free to say what I think. The second is, citizens trust Nigeria's democratic institutions. Citizens can hold government accountable. People resort to violence when their voices are silenced. Constrained civic space contributes to insecurity. You don't have to choose all of them. Some you might want to leave if you don't like. You can only choose the ones that you agree with, even if it's one. You will still be able to submit it. I think I need to be able to see this. All right. So here, first statement that people agree with and strongly agree with is, people resort to violence when their voices are silenced. Is that true? Let's have a voice vote. Is that true? The second statement, constrained civic space contributes to insecurity. It sounds like the same first one, right? We're saying that part of the challenge we're having today is because people are not free to express themselves. Who agrees with that? So do the ayes have it? People's Parliament now, civic space. Do the ayes have it? Okay. All right. The third one says citizens can hold government accountable. Yes or no? Yes or no? I want to hear both yes and no. So yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear people who are saying yes. Let's hear you. Yes, vote.
The question, man.
The people who are saying no. Okay, so 50-50. And some of the people online are saying both yes and no. Okay, so the fourth one. In Nigeria, okay, let me see. In Nigeria, I am free to say what I think. In Nigeria, I am free to say what I think.
Not always.
Okay, let's hear the yes votes. Again. Let's hear the no's. Okay, the no's have it. Finally, the fifth one. Citizens trust Nigeria's democratic institutions. Is the last one. Is that bad? Citizens trust Nigeria's democratic institutions. Okay, so since we are in a civic space, we have to accommodate dissenting opinions. So let's hear the people who are saying yes. Who says yes? Okay, so there's one voice saying yes. Okay, so you're accommodated. Who's saying no? Can we hear the naysayers? Okay, the nays have it. Please, a round of applause for everyone. Clap for yourselves now. Okay, so we're going to move to the panel session now. I would like to introduce the panelists very quickly. The first person I'm going to introduce is Osai Ojigo. Mrs. Osai Ojigo is a lawyer, human rights expert, and gender equality advocate. She serves as country director of Amnesty International Nigeria. Prior to joining Amnesty International, she was Oxfam International's Pan-Africa Program Manager, Coalition Coordinator, State of the Union Coalition, Human Rights Observers to the African Union Mission to Mali and the Sahel, and the Deputy Executive Director of Alliances for Africa. Mrs. Ojigo is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association and a life member of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, PALU. She holds a law degree from the University of Lagos and a master's in law degree from the University of Wolverhampton in the UK. Please a round of applause for her as she comes to the stage. The next person to join us is joining us online. That's Chioma Agwebo. Chioma is a gender justice advocate, digital communication strategist, blogger, and a journalist with experience in radio drama production for BBC Media Action and ASO Radio and Television Services in Abuja. Chioma is a founder of TechHer, a hub focused on support, collaboration and learning in technology. She's of the Abuja hub of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers. A round of applause for her. If you are online, you can give her like the round of applause icon as well. The next person I'm going to invite is Iheme Richmond. Mr. Richmond is the Deputy Director, Monitoring Department of the National Human Rights Commission. Prior to this, he was Chief Investigating Officer, Team Lead, Police, Prisons, and other regulatory bodies, and Assistant Director of Monitoring Department of the Commission. He obtained a bachelor's degree, LLB in law from the Obafemi Awolowo University and the Nigerian Law School. Please a round of applause for Iheme Richmond. Please come up. Next, I would like to introduce Abiodun Bayewu. Mrs. Abiodun Bayewu is the Executive Director of Global Rights. Before joining Global Rights, she worked with the Negotiation and Conflict Management Group, the O'Neill Institute for Global and National Health Law, the Center for African Policy and Peace Strategy, and the American Center for International Labor Solidarity. She is also a writer and an accredited mediator, dispute resolution trainer, and an HIV/AIDS youth counselor. Please, a round of applause for her. All right. So my first question is to the entire panel, and we'll take it one after the other in the order which you're sitting. Just tell us, and with aid of a story, a quick story, how the state of the civic space, and we all get it. The audience has told us how the civic space looks like at the moment in Nigeria. How is that affecting your work?
Affecting work in diverse ways, that citizens can no longer speak. Once the freedom of expression is taken away, then all other basic freedoms are compromised as well. So we work in the instance of, for example, we work on issues of security and human rights. And we're in the context in which Nigeria's security, everything is securitized in Nigeria to the extent that people can no longer speak. That you cannot speak freely about the insecurity in your community. It's harder to work with the media into understanding exactly what is going on in the country. That it is very difficult, for example, for citizens to have dissenting opinion with government. Increasingly, that, for example, you've got the Companies and Allied Matters Act and how that impacts us. Now, I'll tell you a story, very, very recent story, something that happened yesterday. So there is a planned solemn assembly around the issues of insecurity across the country. And we notified the police. Now, every year we get invited after we've notified the police about the solemn assembly. And it's always the same thing, do not proceed. But yesterday, as some people went for that meeting, it was a grueling meeting, phones turned off, kept for hours, and then made to sign undertakings that they will only be there for a few minutes, that the protest will not have more than 5 people making presentations, and the most ridiculous thing, that you will not match the streets or we will clamp down on you. I could tell many stories, but I think I'll stop there and then we'll go in other ways in which our freedoms have regressed as citizens.
So for me, I'll give an example of an experience we had as Amnesty International Nigeria. This was when we released the report called December 2018, and it focused widely on herders and farmers, the conflicts, the killings that have occurred over a period of 3 years, and the fact that despite constant reports by community members, by villagers, nothing had been done to address this particular violation. But you would think that a report that accumulated over 3 years of research, documenting experiences of people who had lost their homes, lost family members, and some even had long-term injuries they were catering from as a result of the violence that they experienced, would get some sort of support from the authorities. But sadly, it began a series of attacks on Amnesty International specifically, and also on those who had kindly shared their stories with us. Over the period of 1 week from the time we released the report on the 17th of December, we are bombarded by calls online, by trolls, lots of questioning, even from the media, asking us about the veracity of our claims. And despite the fact that we had shared preliminary findings with the authorities, we had written to several state governments, especially to those who had claimed they had prosecuted some of the perpetrators of this violence and gotten little or very little or no response at all. The focus was on the organization rather than on whether people have actually died. People were filling IDP camps and what needed to be done. So in a situation like this, you ask yourself, when you bring issues that should be of national interest to public attention, and when you ask the authorities to investigate and to prosecute and to actually go out there to also hear from the people themselves, and you become the subject of trolls, of attacks, then you begin to wonder whether you are actually doing the right thing. And then beyond that, the human rights defenders that were bold enough to share their stories, some had to go into hiding, and then began a criminalization of some sorts against people whose only offense in reality was speaking up for their people and their community. So in this kind of situations, you ask yourself, at what point would the authorities be willing to listen to people who share stories that appear to show that they have failed in providing security for their people? And sadly, we're in 2021, and we are experiencing the years of neglect and the inability of the authorities to address the incessant conflicts that have been going on in different parts of the country. Thank you.
Just before we go to Richmond, would like to hear from Chioma. Chioma, are you there? She there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right. Just how is the state of the civic space affecting your work?
First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Center for having me this most important discussion. I think that one of the biggest things that this shrinking civic space has done to my work is the fact that it's increased the mistrust and the disunity between people. And a lot of times we look at, the shrinking civic space as having only implications for civil society actors, but it also has, implications for citizens. Things like, mob action. So somebody does something wrong, and instead of, citizens or a community handing that person over to the police or over to law enforcement, they decide to burn the person, they decide to strip the person naked, they decide to do all sorts of inhumane things to them. But this is primarily because people are losing faith in organized authority. People are losing faith in the very systems that are supposed to deliver justice. In the course of the work that I do around communications, around advocacy for sexual and gender-based violence, and even advocacy for for the advancement of women in political spaces. I remember very clearly a case in 2019 under the auspices of the Not Too Young to Run movement and the Ready to Run movement, where we chaperoned 50 young women who ran for office, first-time aspirants in Nigeria. One of the women was beaten by a man in her state, not going to mention any identifying details, but she'd been beaten by this man because she went to his office to seek his support for her aspiration, and he took her visit to him to seek his support as an invitation to treat, and so he asked her to climb his table. And when she didn't, then he physically assaulted her, and she told us this story. And we wanted to speak up about it. And we said to her, look, we will put ourselves and our organizations behind you to speak up about this great injustice that you faced. But she said to us, I know nothing is going to happen, and I still live in this community. And when you're all done with everything that you want to do, you're going to leave me here. Right. And so it's the effects that it has on citizens. It's the disillusionment. It's the fact that we are slowly creating systems where people would rather resort to whatever jungle justice they can do for themselves than lean on the structures that are supposed to keep us as an organized, civil, and human society. Thank you.
I want to relate it to ancient and modern. how it affects the institutional function of the National Human Rights Commission. When I say ancient, I'm referring to the legal framework of the commission. You may recall in 2006, when the then executive secretary of the commission was forcefully removed from office, resulting from his expression. And it's not a mistake that the right to freedom of expression scored the highest on the screen. He had made comments in respect of the then attempted constitutional review to make third term a possibility. And the government then of Obasanjo was the president of the Federation then, had seen that comment as an attack on his seeming drive for a third term, and the executive secretary of the commission then was forcefully removed, notwithstanding that he was an executive secretary of a national human rights institution, as a result of his expression of his opinion in the context of that controversy at that time. And indeed, that also showed the weak legal framework of functioning of the commission at that time, and indeed resulted in strengthened advocacy for reform of the law that establishes the commission. And that gave rise to the NHRC Amendment Act 2010, which now confers the commission of some form of independence, a lot more independence and autonomy, to the extent that the executive secretary of the commission is no longer in a position to be arbitrarily removed as it happened at that time. That is in the context of the ancient. Now, as per the modern, in April last year, the Shiites, you are well aware of the Shiites and their protests from time to time, while they were agitating for release of their leader who was incarcerated for a long time. They had come to the National Human Rights Commission in protests calling on the commission to lay their leader, notwithstanding that both local courts had ordered his release, as well as the ECOWAS court, but he was still incarcerated. So they had come to the commission to protest in exercise of their right to freedom of expression, association, and movement. But the Nigerian police, state agents of the states, had brazenly attacked the Shiites and had shot a gun into the commission, as well as sprayed tear gas into the commission. That that indeed desecrated the commission, and is quite condemnable. The right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of association are civil liberties to the extent that such protests or demonstrations are peaceful. It did not warrant the security forces to brazenly attack and descend on the commission in the way that they did. That shrinks the space for expression. And the effect of that is quite traumatic, both to staff of the commission and complainants who were in the commission at that time. The tear gas that they had thrown into the commission had so much effect on a good number of persons who were in the commission who had various health conditions, and had the effect of people being afraid at that time to come to the commission. Good enough, the executive secretary engaged closely with the hierarchy of the police. There was a face-off between the police and the commission. When the executive secretary made his presentation, you heard the presentation, the comment about the report that indicts the police for their conduct during the during the COVID-19 regulation of the lockdown. If the commission were not independent, if the laws that established the commission had not been strengthened, the executive secretary might have been threatened. He may not have been emboldened to indict the police for their conduct during the enforcement of the COVID-19 regulation. So I would end up by saying that it is important to respect these fundamental rights and freedoms, right to freedom of association, right to freedom of expression, right to freedom of peaceful assembly. These are cornerstones of democracy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richmond. Chioma, I'll go to you. Now, I know that Osai, for instance, has talked about how seriously they were trolled online. And I quite recollect that her account was singled out for abuse. I think at some point, there were about 3 or 4 individuals who were abusing her every day on Twitter. The question I'm asking here is, how do pro-accountability actors cope with these challenges? What do you think helps to cope with this challenge?
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, I am aware of accounts, like Osai's having been like trolled endlessly. As a matter of fact, I have now, identified in the course of some research work, done for the Iheme Richmond Foundation, identified a certain like cluster of accounts that continue. It's almost like, you say something about the government, give those accounts about 3 or 4 hours, they will seem to be activated, and then they start to speak against whoever it is who said these things that they consider unsavory to the government. But how are accountability actors coping? First of all, they continue to speak at great cost, at great personal cost. I know someone whose house address was put online once because she'd said something. I know someone who had been threatened with her, nude pictures of her were going to be posted online. I know, for instance, there's a popular, active citizen that we all know who I think in 2019 or 2020 lost her Twitter account about nine times because that's how much her account was getting attacked. Their news media organizations, for instance, Newswire, that have had DDoS attacks constantly as soon as there's a story that is is considered unsavory towards the government, and this has cost them time, it has cost them money, it reduces their efficiency as a media organization to adequately and accurately report the news. So how do these actors cope? One of the things that I've learned, which is like an effective strategy, is for people to spread risk or to share risk by collaborating with others. And so, for instance, if you're going to send an FOI request, and I know that a particular news organization sent an FOI request to the Office of the Attorney General, who ironically is supposed to be the one warehousing and enforcing the implementation of the Freedom of Information Act. And what did this office do? They sued this media organization. So the next time this media organization was going to send an FOI request, they collaborated with, I think it was 6 or 7 other organizations, both media and civil society. How many people do you want to sue? So I think, every day civil society actors are devising new ways to protect themselves, to share risk. The other way is to continuously monitor the civic space, monitor the environment, monitor the National Assembly. Bills like the social media bill, the NGO bill, were all caught in time, even though the National Assembly had tried to be stealth in passing them really quickly because of the vigilance of civil society. I guess the other thing to mention is it's become almost like a cat and mouse game where civil society actors continue to evolve new ways to hold the government accountable, and the government themselves, they keep evolving new ways to shut down these voices. And this can be through legislation. So for instance, the existing Cybercrime Act, it can be through proposed legislation. For instance, the hate speech commission that failed, the social media bill, and things like that. But the truth is that all of this is very exhausting, right? And it slows down efficiency on every side. So instead of people to just focus on the work that they're supposed to be doing, it's like you're advocating with one hand, but with with whatever weapon you have in the other, because you're advocating and you're trying to protect yourself. There are organizations that have suffered countless attacks on their staff. I know that even, and I hope, Osai is going to speak to it, but I know that there have been times when organizations like hers have had to vacate their offices because they've received threats, public threats, that they're going to be picketed or that they're going to be attacked, etc. And the question I continue to ask is, why is it that it's easier for people to go in front of security forces, to go in front of the media, to threaten violence, and nothing happens to them, as is the case with NSAS, for instance? But when you have peaceful protesters carrying nothing but cardboard papers, maybe flags, singing the national anthem, or doing other things that would otherwise be considered as patriotic, those ones get attacked, those ones get arrested, those ones get hosed with hot water, those ones get attacked with tear gas by security forces. That's the question we should be asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know that there was a friend of mine who hosted a morning social, I think it was Kakaki AIT. We used to talk about the trending topics on social media. And at some point, he had to escape Nigeria and apply for asylum in the US. Now, you've been through the thick of it, Osai. How have you coped? How have you been able to continue doing what you do? Just from your personal experience, what worked for you in coping with all of this attack?
So it's been a very impactful time. I think one of these days we pray for the peace of mind and the space to be able to write our experiences and to be able to look back, and so that others can also learn from it. For me, the first thing was personal safety. So removing myself from places where people know me. So whether it's the office, whether it's home, going into some other spaces. And when I say safe spaces now, oftentimes, even as much as you protect your privacy, people kind of know which area you live. They know where your office is. So you avoid those spots and you go where they would not ordinarily think you would be. So this could be a friend's house. It could be another relative's house. I had to put measures in place to secure my children's privacy and to ensure that their school were fully aware of the work I do, to ensure that nobody picks them from school, with very clear protocols as to how they should engage. I had to ensure that other family members, we had to open a separate family WhatsApp group so that we can communicate to my parents, so that when they don't hear from me, I'm not having to speak to 20 people at the same time asking me the same questions, and people know who to contact if they can't reach me, for example. And then also to be able to build a community of supporters within the civil society movement in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. So quite a number of you present in this room, as well as outside Nigeria, were on constant watch and also using their own spaces to talk about what was happening in Nigeria. The beauty about the NSAS was that because we had such huge international support from people we've worked with, they were able to get our stories to venues, to special rapporteurs at the UN, at the African Union who were communicating with our government, such that in a way it helped to reduce some of the impact that would have negatively affected us. Sadly, the death threats that were issued were never responded to. We had written to the IG of police, notifying him of the situation, the CP for FCT as well. We only got a response, I think, a couple of weeks after to acknowledge that we've received it. But to date, no information about the people that made the threats, the actions they're going to take to prevent it, and what they're going to do differently to ensure human rights defenders are not constantly put into this sort of trial. Luckily, I was able to also get counseling because there's also a lot of secondary trauma in the work that we do. I had to do certain sessions last year to speak with a counselor so that I can also begin to look at what my experiences were, how it impacted on my team, and how I could be able to support my team, because it's one thing to be worried about your safety, but you're also worrying about the safety of other people as well, and thinking about what measures you can put in place. So coming out, we are more aware of digital security, what we need to do to secure that, but more importantly, how do we ensure that we support one another, because nobody can understand what we are going through except those of us that are in the thick of it. And this has also led us to provide the learnings through capacity building to others as well. One thing I'll say finally is that the well-being of each and every one of us is quite key. And one thing I took out from the experience is that even when everything is loud and everything is happening, you have to deliberately take time out to remove yourself, to sleep, to eat, to rest, because it's in those moments that you recharge your batteries and you're better able to carry out the tasks that you need to do. Thank you.
A round of applause. So before I go to Abiodun, I'd like to ask, I'm using your microphone. So I would like to ask Mr. Richmond what the institutional options are. What institutional options do pro-accountability actors have? So apart from eating, sleeping, recharging, going on exile, writing to the police, what are our options for coping with this repression of the civic space? Thank you.
Coping mechanisms, adopting or evolving coping mechanisms in the heat of the unfriendly space, it's important. Adopting partnerships, extending partnerships, creating partnerships, consolidating partnerships is also the way to go. For instance, the National Human Rights Commission has a mandate to discharge, and it doesn't have an option. It has to discharge that mandate, promoting human rights, protecting human rights, and enforcing human rights. There's no option to doing that. So, staff who function within the commission in the face of the friendly space ought to scale up resilience, scale up security measures, personal security measures, and institutional security measures in order to discharge the mandate of the commission. And then the COVID-19 has indeed, part of the gains of COVID-19 is the online ways of doing things now. Therefore, it's not every investigation one must go physically to do. It's possible to use networks to do the investigation and engage visually, unless one has to physically attend to a particular issue. But for the case of the National Human Rights Commission, there's no alternative than to discharge that mandate.
Thank you. Abiodun, is there a way that there are institutional options for holding government, human rights violators accountable, for pushing back?
So there are options. The question is, how effective are the options? Let's start from the top. Let's start with the Constitution that guarantees the protection of these rights. Let's also start with, I love Section 2 of the Nigerian Constitution. I don't care what people say about the Constitution, there's material points, particularly Section 14 that tells what government should do and what the roles of citizens are. But then you go on to Section 4, Chapter 4 of the Constitution that talks about the protection of these rights. So we do have constitutional options, and that you would think that our courts should also be places where you can find refuge. But even before you get to the court, to the National Human Rights Commission. First, I think the National Human Rights Commission is grossly underfunded, and there may be deliberate attempts at ensuring that it's not as functional as it should be. For several years, there wasn't even a board for the National Human Rights Commission, which means that decisions could not be made. So you had staff rolling over day after day over things that they really needed to do, but were crippled by government itself to not be able to do that. You've also got the courts, and we know the truth about the courts. As a matter of fact, the courts in Nigeria, let's also be very honest, have a few judges whose positions are guaranteed by their spouses or who they're in bed with. That there's too much political interference, and for that very reason, the courts have been on strike. I think, are we on day 50 yet of the strike? But if your courts are on strike, where do you run to as citizens and activists in a country like this? So we do not have government fulfilling and enforcing the Constitution. We have a human rights commission that's grossly underfunded, unable to even leave a lot of times to do investigations. I'll give another instance. We had done in a case of the Human Rights Commission about the Zamfara lead poisoning at the height of poisoning in 2011. It's 2021. Just being able to mobilize enough funds to get to Zamfara and feel that constitutional duty of ensuring the protection of lives, the welfare of all citizens. And you really can't blame the commission. Show me where your money is, and I'll show you what your values are. Nigeria's values are not yet rights-based, and so we've underrated our Human Rights Commission. Other institutions that we could resort to, I would have thought the National Assembly. But if the National Assembly is having such a hard time calling service chiefs and the president to report to them, how much of our representation are they doing in any instance, even in the protection of fundamental rights? If Ibogu died in hands of SARS, I remember that the National Assembly had sent, a family had petitioned, and the National Assembly had sent for the police. It's 2021 May. No, they haven't appeared. And this has gone on. And I wish I could tell you a positive story other than us huddling together, other than governments of other countries also offering protection to our own people. I wish I could tell you something positive. No, we don't have adequate protection.
Thank you. A round of applause. All right. Just your permission to close a little late today. I know we're supposed to close at 12, but maybe extend for 15 to 20 more minutes. Take questions from the audience. So 3 questions. If you have a question for any of the panelists, including the best Chioma that is online, can you raise your hand? Okay. Okay, so there's 2. Why only men? Is there a woman who has a question? No comment, just question. Comment or question? Question. Okay. All right. So please come forward.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I was only holding my peace, but when it looked like there was a surfeit of women in the hall, I needed to step up. What, in your view, and this is a question for the 4 members of the panel, of the role of faith? Your faith, what you believe in, doesn't have to be religious, but holding on to something beyond you that you believe in, that keeps you grounded in this unfriendly environment while doing your work. What has that done for you? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the man in white, please make your way forward. And then you. Then we'll answer the questions and we'll close the session. Okay, please, your name?
Hello. Good afternoon. I am Umar Ibrahim Odo, coordinator Arewa Youth Movement of Nigeria. So my question goes to Mr. Richard of National Human Rights Commission. You have mentioned 2 things about the incident of Shias that protested, even have the courage to enter the National Human Rights tear gas, and going to the, what do we call it, NSAS. Nigerians have been frustrated. They came out peacefully protecting for their rights to end their scope robberies. Then, as a human rights commission in Nigeria, what was the solution you think, as we, the youth of Nigeria, to take in tackling such as the government are trying to frustrate us as youth in Nigeria to come out and express our freedom of expression and whatsoever? Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Human Rights Commission, you are going to give advice to the youth.
Good day. My name is Marvelous Chinedu. Signature TV. My first question is this. During the NSAS and then enforcing the COVID-19 compliance law enforcement agencies, we saw how they treated people. So the question is this: how can we regulate the regulators? And the second, the most important one, there seems to be a nexus between stiffening the civic space and their corruption. So the agencies that are charged with tracking anti-corruption, ICPC and all the rest of them, how can we make sure that they are on their nails? And then lastly, it seems like the judiciary, this is very important. It seems like the judiciary is overburdened, especially trying human rights cases. Should there be a special tribunal that should be concentrating on treating human rights cases? Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to start with the Human Rights Commission and we'll work our way down. Please, this will be your last contribution, so you can also conclude things.
What can the youths do in the face of repression when they protest? First is to make the point that some human rights are not absolute. Right to freedom of expression, right to freedom of association, right to freedom of assembly ought to be lawful, and particularly law to freedom of expression and assembly. And indeed, all human rights Apart from the right to freedom from torture, inhuman and degrading treatments, a good number of human rights may be curtailed for public good. In the context of right to freedom of assembly, right to freedom of expression, it ought to be lawful. Right to peaceful assembly is guaranteed. When a protest turns riotous, when a protest turns violent, the security agencies would not stay back and watch. However, in intervention of security agencies, they ought to be proportionate. They ought to comply with various human rights standards in containing protests. They cannot use live ammunition, for instance, in curtailing protests. So what can the youth do? To the extent that youths are entitled to protests, it is important that such protests remain peaceful. Because if the protests turn violent, that may be an invitation for the security agencies to step in order to curtail the violence. And somebody had asked a question about having a specific tribunal for human rights. Was that a question? Yeah, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. And since the constitutional review is ongoing now, it's also an opportunity to make that recommendation to the ongoing constitutional review process. Thank you.
Thank you. Chioma, do you have any response?
Thank you very much, Amara, and it's been like pretty enlightening just listening to the views of others. There was a very special question, the very first question asked on the place of religion in advocacy and how, you know, if there's something that activists hold on to. And I think that's a really special question because especially if you do any bit of work around sexual and gender-based violence, there are days when you know, you really need something to hold on to. I'll give a quick example. In 2019, a 3-year-old was raped by a 70-year-old man. And I remember going to film them because of some work I was doing. And I just broke down. And I started thinking about, I'm only here to do one filming. There are people who have to deal with these cases over and over and over again. And just to, you know, to close out on context for this story, it's been 2 years. This family still hasn't gotten any justice because the police said to the mother of this child that the man has apologized and they should remember that he's old and that also his son wants to give them 25,000 naira. And this woman who sells meat pie for a living said, I saw this man inside my child. I don't know what you want me to do with 25,000 naira. I don't want this man to hurt anyone else. And I'm sorry for being very stark and very gory, but I think it's important to understand or just get a glimpse of what, you know, SGBB responders have to deal with sometimes on a daily basis. And so what's the place of religion? I think whatever it is that a person worships becomes absolutely critical when you just need to recharge, when you just need to hide, when you just need to find something that helps you get out of bed the next day. The other thing that's become super important for me and for a bunch of others that I know is building communities of practice, especially with other women, where we find time to have conversations about the challenges that we're facing, but also where we find time to just strengthen ourselves and draw strength from each other, and cry and rage and vent, especially when it seems like things aren't going the way they should go, or people are protecting people, or, you know, men are finding power and therefore avoiding justice or escaping justice. So that was a question that really stood out for me. Thank you. And the second one on, the second question I want to respond to on the overburdened judiciary and if we need a special judicial vehicle. I think that, you know, we don't need any extra things. And perhaps I'm a layman and I'm not a lawyer. So, you know, this is my opinion, but I don't think that we need any extra thing. I think we need to strengthen what we have. We have We have a judiciary now that is a mixture of people who are repressed, a mixture of people who do not have their voices, but also a mixture of people who are afraid. And so when it comes to certain things, it's almost as if we currently have two sets of rules, one for people, actually three, one for people who are rich, one for people who are poor, and one for people with any sort of proximity towards the government in power. And so a special tribunal, a special anything is, to my opinion, not going to yield much, because is there the political will to execute, or is there the political will to back whatever it is that this judiciary is going to do? Again, case in point, Kogi State, a commissioner has been accused of raping a woman, of assaulting a woman, etc. He's still in office. He's been in office from day one. The government of Kogi State has tried, specially to frustrate the prosecution and the investigation of that case. And then you have Ogun State, where another commissioner was accused of sexually molesting and assaulting a young woman. He was suspended almost immediately, and the police have been given free rein to do their work. We don't need a special tribunal in any of those cases. What we need is a government that says, if a person touches a child, if a person touches another person, man, woman, boy, girl, without their consent, there will be swift commensurate punishment. We don't need you don't need any special tribunals for that. We just need a government that prioritizes sexual and gender-based violence, or prioritizes crimes against Nigerians and says, if you commit a crime, we're coming up to, tomorrow makes it 1 year since Vera was killed in a church, was raped and killed in a church in Edo State, which is one of the reasons why we convened the state of emergency GBV movement. It's been 1 year. There is no indication that her family is going to get justice. Kini Umorin was killed in Uyo. Between the police and all of the conspiracy theories around that, again, I do not have any belief or hope that justice is going to be done for that girl. We don't need a special tribunal for that. What we need is the conviction to do the right thing and ensure that justice is delivered to people when they have been wronged. Thank you.
Thank you. Osai.
I was just saying that Chioma has kind of shared some of the feedback I wanted to give, so I'll go to the other questions. But starting with the fact that you have to be a person of faith. You have to be someone that has a value-based structure for you to be able to do the work that we do day in, day out, and to be able to hold on to your mission, and really having people around you who also share similar values can motivate. So we motivate one another in that sense. So to the question, how do we regulate the regulators? I don't know whether it was in reference to the media or regulators in general. The thing is, the regulators also feed on the popularity of an issue that they are serving. So if they sell to the people, we are doing this for your own good, and the people believe it, then the regulators have no resistance when they try to impose draconian policies and laws. So that is why we're investing a lot, when I say we now, civil society, not just Amnesty International, on human rights education, on raising awareness, on reaching people and connecting with people on the issues, because oftentimes they distance you from the issue. So I take Kama, for example. When the regulators say, oh, we're doing it so that there's transparency and accountability in the CSO sector, the person on the street says, okay, that's fine, it's a good thing, right? But if they understand that this will have an impact on the work CSOs do, because the real aim is not accountability, but actually a gag rule in order to silence those who they do not agree with or whose methods they cannot control, then the people on the streets then begin to push back. And what we've seen is that regulators do not like to be unpopular. So it means we have to make the work that CSOs and key humanitarian organizations do popular again in order to get public support to push back. And finally, on the issue about the judiciary, in a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court issued an order that human rights issues should be accelerated. In 2021, we still have many cases waiting on appeal as a result of people with proximity to state power delaying those cases from moving on. So like Chioma, I also support the view that it's about ensuring that the political will is there to get things done and not necessarily creating special courts to achieve that. Special courts will only work if they are given the resources, technical, financial, moral authority in order to carry out their task effectively. Thank you.
Round of applause, please.
Let me start with the question of faith. I don't think that you would be in the kind of work you do without faith, as Chioma has said, and as well as Osai. There is always the sense of a higher purpose, of a calling. That, for example, I'm one of the shyest people that I know, and also not very, very confident. But then you find yourself asking yourself, if not now, when? If not me, who? And that you just have to leave life afraid as you are, because there is a higher purpose. And that if you believe in God, that you answer to this higher purpose, to God. And if not in God, in values that you hold deep and dear. That there is a higher purpose. And I think it's a sense that we must all find within ourselves. But I think there's some of us who just gravitate to this very easily, maybe from childhood. Maybe there are also cultures to which we've been brought up that says you serve a higher purpose. To the question of what's the correlation between corruption and the shrinking of the civic space? Every correlation you can draw. That a few selfish people will try to gag and muzzle everyone into silence to fit their own selfish purpose. State capture is real. It's real because of the resources that we have, and that we have, and it's not just about particular individuals in power. It's those who feed off the power in the corridors, who hold the puppet masters, who hold the puppets and sway their hands, are the real people that we're dealing with. And that you find that corruption is not just about money. Corruption is also about the decisions that we make every day about issues of the state and about for the public good. That these are the real reasons, or some of the core reasons behind the shrinking of the civic space. And that how do we deliver ourselves as a people? That we must understand that democracy is not just ballot papers going into boxes. Democracy is when you and I can decide on the country that we want. Democracy is when the voice of the poorest person in Nigeria, of a person living with disability, the voice of the woman selling oppa in the morning is as strong as the voice of the president in this country, where minorities know they are heard, their opinions are respected, even if not agreed with, where we know that we understand how our money, our resources, and our common good is being protected, and we're part of that decision-making process on a daily basis, where I can call a radio station and express truth and not be told by the anchor that we cannot take such expressions on this channel. That when I can march this street and say I disagree with how security is being handled in this country, and I am not afraid to take a 4-year-old to learn that aspect of democracy with me, when I'm not afraid that the danger that I'm afraid of in marching on the streets is not the government sending thugs after me, then we will say we have a democracy. Until then, the ballots mean nothing. Sorry,
What a wonderful note to end the session. Please, a round of applause. I would like a louder round of applause for Kwame. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Abiodun, for that. Please take your seat now. It's now my pleasure to invite the closing remarks for this forum, which has been very engaging. Ms. Iheme Obi will be delivering the closing remarks. She is the new convener of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Group and the country director of Action Aid Nigeria. She has worked with the Nigerian Labour Congress and has a well-established career in the development and democracy sector, working on issues ranging from gender, human rights, social justice, inclusion for vulnerable groups, governance, and women economic empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Iheme.
May I stand on the existing protocol? I wish to commend the Yar'Adua Foundation for organizing this meeting and the effort in protecting civic space, as well as galvanizing the collective action and bringing especially the National Human Rights Commission here. I want to say that the Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room, in collaboration with Yar'Adua Foundation, in February 2021, held a review meeting on the findings from its research on reclaiming the civic space. Their findings were extensively discussed at that meeting to create better understanding around the issues identified and to offer solutions to curtail the trends of this shrinking civic space. And I'm happy that the name of Civicus was mentioned here. And I remember how many things they have funded in terms of looking at the civil society in their contributions to nationhood. I want to remind us, because it seems the history is not being looked at. In civil society contribution to democracy in Nigeria, even in the time of military, we challenged the military regime under the Abacha regime on the 20th of December 1995. We were at the meeting, at the extraordinary meeting of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to challenge the military to return to democracy. Many of us went to the bush, even after that, going from one place to the other, being arrested and detained in several places in the struggle for democracy in Nigeria. And now we are in a democracy. And so the place is shrinking. Why is it shrinking? I just want to recognize, so those efforts of galvanizing, that you also have access, not only the National Human Rights Commission doing its own work, but also the African Human and People's Rights Commission. That commission is available for citizens as well to query. We have never taken any case for them from the democratic, since the democracy was reinstated in Nigeria. And so we need to remind our politicians that civil society organizations, many of them were never on the streets at the time. So we went in the struggle for democracy and we got democracy, but many of us were not ready for leadership. We gave it to the politicians, and this is what we have to do. So what's their mission? I just want to recognize the efforts of all stakeholders. Working in the civic space, it is important that conversations like this are held to increase awareness, on the shrinking civic space, to identify and assess threats, as well as share ideas on the subject. I think another, we have the National Human Rights Commission, but another very important vehicle for citizens' involvement and social mobilization is the National Orientation Agency, which is just standing there. What do you want your citizens to hear? If citizens are agitating, what do you want them to hear? They are in all the local governments, and each one of them is attached with a political science graduate, but they're not working. And these are instruments of governance that can bring, government to the people. the role of the civil society is very vital for a nation, and more so in a democracy. If we were important during the military to get, democracy back, what now? Should we not be engaging? Should you not talk to your citizens? So the fight for the civil liberties is an old age, is an age-old one that has been present through the military era and democratic dispensations, gaining momentum over the years, so we cannot give up. The times may be different, but the mandate remains largely the same. And so holding government to account is one of the things that we must do, ensuring the protection of human rights and enhancing citizens' participation. Chioma was arguing online that a woman who is a seller, because of the gender-based violence that we're having against women and girls that you're having. If any one of you in the room now, both online and also in the room here, if you found a man, raping your child, what would you do? And so it's no longer in the data, it becomes personal, isn't it? What would you do? But then it is different between somebody who has money and somebody and the poor. So when there's a woman who you are now offering 25,000, it's okay for the dignity of human beings. How with the dignity of the person? How can we protect those who cannot protect themselves? So the threat to civic space, with emerging threats against the Nigerian civil society by the state and also non-state actors, manifesting in the forms of suppression of the press freedom, clamp down on protesters that we have seen, and government critics, oppression in terms of regulation of non-governmental organizations. You are regulating those who brought you to power. And we are not saying we are law-abiding citizens because we sing "Arise, O Compatriots" in our national anthem. We also pledge together, just like you pledge. I don't know if you are meeting yours, but in the civil society, we stand up to Nigeria and we account for the things we do. What are you doing? Because with a pledge, if you violate the pledge of Nigeria, you should go to court. But there's so many cases in court. I think that's one of the things of the state capture. There's so many cases in court, and who is hearing the cases? So the judiciary, sometimes we don't know what to do anymore. But everyone who is in a position of authority is going to be held accountable wherever you are. And so, in spite of the challenges recorded within the civic space, it is important that all actors within the sector remain resolute and dedicated to their work. Indeed, desperate the times, we call it desperate times, they say call for desperate measures. With the country facing multifaceted challenges, the commitment of civil society actors is needed more now than any other time to sustain the Nigerian democracy. Unity, unity, unity should be the watchword for Nigerians, and we need social mobilization. We need to mobilize ourselves, not against ourselves. But one of the things that the political class does is using us against each other. You need to know yourself. And I think the quality of citizenship will speak for itself. You as a citizen of Nigeria, can you determine your quality? What is your quality? To be able to stand up right for Nigeria. So the civil society organizations, the media, and even the government actors are called to collaborate to protect this space in fighting repressive laws and fake news, enhancing their internal processes, also improving the regulatory compliances in the culture, increasing advocacy, and most importantly, remaining steadfast in their different causes. This Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room condemns the burning of INEC offices and the police, police stations across the country. The police, they may not be doing what you think they're doing right, but we can challenge them. And that is why when we say, can you engage the government of Nigeria? Yes, we can. We need to organize and engage them. But if you are burning down, if you are not allowing the democratic space to also exist, then we squeeze further our democratic space. The spaces, the civic space will be squeezed if we don't allow the civic education and also elections to take place. And so we condemn that and call on all those involved, on citizens, to begin to still believe in themselves. But the political class, we need to join with the need to be recalled. And one of the things that I try to look at, We need to join hands, of course, to hold government to account. We need to be able to point fingers where we need to, where we can. Poverty, again, is a major issue in the civic space because unemployment has come to stay. Millions of Nigerians are being poured into the market, job market every day. And now you look right and left and in front of you, you see unemployed youths all over the place. That is very, very major. And so it provides them very vulnerable to the people who use, those who are unemployed or those who are looking for even a daily meal. The issue of insecurity, I must say here, that the Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room really condemns, and also we are not satisfied with the way the government of Nigeria has handled insecurity. But just when like you see the light of the day with the air crash that killed the chief of army staff and members of his team, were seeing some lights that were coming around. And all of a sudden we have an air crash. We have a crash that has happened that have taken away this light, these illustrious children of Nigeria. But not up to 3 months ago, we also saw almost something similar. Another crash that took so many illustrious sons, because it takes a lot of investment to produce a general and then to let them go. So Nigerian civil society is grieving. We are wounded by the death of this cream of Nigerian military people. But we are asking also that whatever they investigate, they should let out. They should bring out the information that they have. They should bring out the report of the investigation. Nigerian leaders must make selfless decisions to protect all Nigerians, young and old, for their own children and the children of others. Because the children of Nigeria, whether you are rich or poor, you are on the streets of Nigeria. And as long as you are not ready to provide for the many in Nigeria, your few children cannot survive Nigeria. And so it's your own interest that you have a rethink now. Those who are insane are making decisions that is wounding Nigeria, that are looting the economy of Nigeria, that is now negating, because what we have today, the students we have in the public schools, our children, we are raising hungry Nigerians. The quality of those in government today, which were provided by government, is not the same as the quality of the young people that we are producing. And so we need to raise the standard, and it is in your own state, because they say there is repentance, isn't it? When you think of your ancestors, all of us seated here now, we are going to be ancestors one day. What kind of ancestors are you going to be? Are you an ancestor that came and stole so much from people and wounded people? Because the guardian says conscience is a wound, isn't it? When you steal from people, what kind of ancestor will you become? You have a chance to rethink. You have a chance. You took a pledge to Nigeria. It is time for you to also rethink. The constitutional reform that is going on now, women inclusion must be a priority, because where you have representation, most of the conflict that we're having, the most who are wounded, who bear the burden of conflict are women, but they are not on the table. And so when you are making appointive positions, you are also making elective positions. We want to see more women. We need ourselves to stand up right, stand up for Nigeria, each and every one of you. I want to challenge you this morning that wherever you find your space in your nexus, you need to stand up for Nigeria. When you see black, call it black. When you see white, call it white. And when we need to unite ourselves to challenge the judiciary, how many cases are in court today? You have the parliament. Right now, to be an older Nigeria is even a challenge. The younger ones are complaining. Those who have retired, many of them have not been paid their gratuity, so you condemn them to death, not to talk of pension. And so we need to challenge ourselves that a wholesomeness. I believe in Nigeria. We in the civil society will believe in it. We are grateful for this space, but to believe in ourselves is to organize and challenge. We can challenge them. If they say we cannot challenge, but we also refuse to be used. If the big men call the younger generation, when they call you to go on the streets, call their children to go to the street. Thank you very much.
Strong words, fiery words. while performing that duty, we must be aware of social norms. We must keep at the back of our minds that social norms prevail in this context. We must address them if they are negative, take advantage of them. We should mobilize in communities, not in general, not in elitist settings, but that we should learn to mobilize in communities. The convener of the Nigerian civil society situation used the word unity. We need to collaborate with each other. We need each other more at this time. We must also remember to remain resolute. Hang on to whatever faith, whatever hope, whatever makes you wake up every day in the morning and gives you hope. Use that as a way to inspire yourself, to galvanize yourself, to remain resolute. Remember to document incidents, document abuses. Don't forget, don't say that nothing will be done. Because as we have learned from so many things that have been said here today, including what the ES of the National Human Rights Commission said, there will be a day of reckoning. There will be, eventually. It could be when you are alive. It could also come when you are not alive, when you are passed on. And the advice is that when that day comes, it will meet you having done your own duty, having done what you were supposed to do. And if we do that, the closing remarks tells us that we would leave a legacy of accountability and we become ancestors that were known for enthroning or doing our best to enthrone accountability in Nigeria. Thank you and God bless you. That was not loud enough for all of us. Lunch is served. So there will be lunch in the atrium. Apologies to the people online. We haven't figured out a way to send lunch on virtual meetings. But for those in the room, lunch is served. Thank you.